Jay Gatsby was not in love with Daisy Buchanan. He was in love with what her approval would prove about the man he had become. This is the detail almost everyone misses, because the story has been sold to you as romance. It is not. It is a field manual on status anxiety, and Gatsby is the perfect case study in what happens when a man tries to perform his way into belonging. You think you know this story: the self-made millionaire, the lavish parties, the green light across the water, the doomed romantic who believes so completely in the dream that he made it real. That is the version the culture feeds you, because the culture runs on the same lie Gatsby believed, that if you construct the right image, the world will finally grant you the identity you never had. But Fitzgerald was not writing a love story. He was writing an autopsy, and the body on the table is not Gatsby's corpse in the pool. It is the psychology of a man who replaced himself so completely that he forgot where the performance ended and the person began. Here is what most people get wrong about Gatsby. They think his tragedy was that he wanted something he couldn't have. His tragedy was that he wanted something that, even if he had gotten it, would have destroyed him. Daisy was never the prize. She was the validator. She was old money, East Egg, the social register, the world that looked at James Gats, the son of poor farmers, the boy who rowed a boat in the dark, and saw nothing worth inviting inside. Gatsby didn't want to marry Daisy. He wanted to become the kind of man who could stand in her living room and not feel the ghost of his own insufficiency hovering behind him. The British psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott called this the false self. He observed that children who grow up in environments where their authentic needs are ignored learn to perform a version of themselves that is more acceptable to the people around them. The false self is not a lie. It is architecture. It is a structure of survival so sophisticated that it becomes indistinguishable from the person. James Gats built Jay Gatsby because James Gats was not surviving. The mansion, the Oxford manor, the pink suit, the inherited wealth mythology, these were not decorations. They were load-bearing walls. But here is the mechanism Winnicott understood that Gatsby never did. The false self can never rest. It cannot take a vacation. It cannot have an off night. Because the moment the performance falters, the audience remembers who is underneath. And the audience, in Gatsby's case, was not Daisy. It was everyone. It was Tom Buchanan, who looked at him across the Plaza Hotel and saw a man trying too hard. It was the guests at his parties, who used his house and his liquor and his generosity and never once asked his name. It was the entire social order of East Egg, which allowed him to spend his money in their proximity but would never have accepted his blood. The economist Thorstein Veblen wrote about this a generation before Fitzgerald published his novel. Veblen called it conspicuous consumption, the spending of money to acquire status rather than utility. But Veblen missed the psychological layer. Gatsby didn't buy the mansion to impress Daisy. He bought the mansion to convince himself that he had become someone who deserved to be impressed by. The parties were not seduction. They were rehearsal. He was practicing being the man who belonged in that world, night after night, hoping that if he performed long enough, the performance would calcify into reality. You do this, not with stolen bonds in a mansion, but in the smaller, more precise ways that the performance seeps into the structure of a life. You are in a room where everyone went to the right schools and knows the right references, and you feel the subtle shift in your posture, the slight elevation in your vocabulary, the careful omission of where you actually grew up. You are not being deceptive. You are being strategic. You are performing belonging because the alternative, being seen as you are, feels like a kind of social death. You are in a relationship with someone whose approval you have decided matters, and you find yourself curating your opinions, tempering your reactions, becoming the version of yourself that is most acceptable to them. You tell yourself this is compromise. It is not. It is editing. You are removing the parts of yourself that might trigger their withdrawal, and you are calling the remaining version love. You are at work, and you have built a reputation for being the person who never says no, who is always available, who makes everyone else's emergencies disappear. You call this loyalty. You call this professionalism. What you do not call it is the belief that your value is conditional on your utility. That if you stop being useful, you will stop being invited. You are building a personal brand, a network, a reputation, And somewhere underneath the optimization, you feel a quiet terror that if the performance stops, the person underneath will not be enough to sustain what you have built. The shadow version of ambition does not look like insecurity. It looks like discipline. It looks like high standards. It looks like someone who never settles, who understands that success requires sacrifice. And all of that is true. But underneath, the engine is different. The engine is not desire for excellence. It is terror of exposure. Gatsby's face at the Plaza Hotel is the moment this mechanism breaks into the open. Tom Buchanan does not defeat him with evidence. He defeats him with indifference. He refuses to be intimidated. He refuses to grant Gatsby the status Gatsby has paid so much to acquire. And in that moment, the mask slips. Fitzgerald describes it with terrible precision. The man underneath is revealed. And the man underneath is terrified, not because he will lose Daisy, but because he will be exposed as someone who was never supposed to be in that room in the first place. This is the crack, the moment when the clean version stops working. Not because the world discovers the lie, but because the performer discovers that the lie was never enough. That no amount of performing could have made Daisy choose him. Not because she didn't love him, but because she didn't love him in the way he needed to be loved. Unconditionally, completely, as James Gatz, rather than as J. Gatsby. She loved the performance. She loved the dream. And the dream required him to keep performing forever. Now, here is the framework. Not advice, a way of seeing. When you find yourself constructing an identity to earn a place in a room, ask 3 questions. First, am I building something or am I editing something? Building adds, editing removes. If you are removing parts of yourself to become acceptable, you are not improving, you are performing. Second, what happens if I stop? Not forever, for one evening, one conversation, one moment where you do not optimize, do not curate, do not perform. If the answer is panic, you are not living, you are rehearsing. Third, who am I when no one is grading me, when there is no status to acquire, no validation to earn, no green light to reach toward? If you do not know the answer, you have already become Gatsby. You have built a mansion around a vacancy. Someone who has done this work moves differently. They perform when the role requires it, at work, in social situations, in moments where a mask is necessary. But they do not mistake the mask for the face. They can step out of character and know that something remains. They can be insufficient in a room and not feel that their existence is being voted on. Gatsby died in the pool, still waiting for a phone call that would have validated him. He died because he could not imagine a version of love that didn't require him to be someone else first. He died because he had spent so long becoming the man who deserved the green light that he had forgotten how to want anything without earning it. But you are not Gatsby. You are the person watching the story, recognizing the mechanism, feeling the uncomfortable accuracy of a man who performed so completely that he forgot where the stage ended. The fact that you can see it means the work has already begun. The tragedy was never that he couldn't have Daisy. It was that he never asked who he would have been if he hadn't needed her to want him back.